Hi class. So this third section in chapter 26 is going to be discussing rhythm and meter, right? So just as the harmonic language and the vertical sonorities and the colors and the timbres that were being used during this time were becoming more varied and more experimental, so too was rhythm, right? So, while composers were trying to build synthetic scales and with those scales create different kinds of sonorities, right, they were also trying to see if they could create new forms of rhythm, and, well, it didn't work out quite as planned. There were definitely a lot of new innovations during this time, such as mixed meter, right? Asymmetrical meters, additive rhythms, non-retrogradable rhythms. So a lot of things were being tossed about. And so if we look at the bottom of page 492, it discusses a hemiola, right? Essentially a rhythm that implies a 3-to-2 ratio, right? Brahms was a big fan of hemiolas, right? We know what symmetrical meters are, and we know what asymmetrical meters are, right? So this rhythm section, we don't really need to go a lot into depth since we've already experienced a lot of these things with modern music, right? We have mixed meter, right, where we have maybe 2/4 to 3/4, 2/4, 3/4. And we also have something called a displaced accent, right? Not to be confused with a hemiola, not to be confused with syncopation, right? Where syncopation is feeling music or feeling a pulse that is off the beat. Displaced accent is feeling a pulse that is typically on the beat in the non-traditional sense. So the book gives the example at the bottom of page 493, 3/4, the strong beat being on beat 1, the last 2 beats being weak. In this case, the book gives the example with the strong beat being on beat 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? We're going to kind of go through this a lot, pretty quick, right? We have polymeters, right? Where one hand is in 1 meter and another hand is in another meter, or one instrument's in 1 meter, another instrument's in another meter, right? We have ametric music, right? Ametric meaning music that lacks of sense of any kind of pulse or regular beat groupings, right? And then we have something called a tempo modulation, which I'll give an example of a little bit later. Also called metric modulation, right? If we look at the bottom of page 495, we see quarter note 1, 2, and 2/4, 1, 2. Then it says that eighth note, so this triplet then, that triplet eighth note then equals just a regular eighth. So we'll go 1, 2, right? So it ends up speeding up the tempo, right? Really used kind of famously by Elliott Carter and some of the American composers during this time period, right? Then we have something called an additive value, where we're adding just a slight extra beat of music onto already a complete measure. So 8 eighth notes in a 4/4 measure, right? We're going to, maybe one would have a plus sign, so it would go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, right? So we just add just a little bit extra beat to any kind of note. And the rest of this chapter is really stuff that you should know, not that you're ever really going to see or practice in music, right? Non-retrogradable rhythms. Retrograde meaning backwards. So if it's non-retrogradable, it is the same forward as the same backwards, right? And then the Fibonacci sequence, where they're exploring math and rhythm, since math is so tied to rhythm and rhythm tied to math. The Fibonacci sequence 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on, right? So they're relating this to note values, okay? Ostinato. We know what an ostinato is already, right? A repeated pattern, melody, or bass line, or harmonic ostinato. In this case, they started messing around with a rhythmic ostinato, right? And then we have isorhythm, right? It's a modern term for a rhythmic technique associated with medieval motets and masses. In post-tonal music, an isorhythm typically consists of repeated rhythmic figure called a talia, right? So almost like a rhythmic motive, in combination with a repeated pitch sequence of a different length called a color. An example, example 26-41, the talia is ya-da-da, right? So, study this rhythm section in chapter 26, and it's pretty self-explanatory when you get right down to it. It lists a term, gives you the definition, gives you an example, right? These are techniques that have been used frequently, infrequently. They come into popularity, they fall out of popularity throughout music, both in pop music and traditional classical music. So you'll encounter them all over the place. I mean, Bach was using non-retrogradable rhythms in fugues. Was it called that then? No, it wasn't called that then. It was just, oh, that rhythm is the same forward as backward, because Bach is, kind of a music genius like that, right? So don't look too much into it as, oh, I need to look in all of my music for non-retrogradable rhythms or additive rhythms. Additive rhythms are very rare, very rare. Mixed meter, very, very common thing. Used all over today. Look at the bluegrass mass. Look at a lot of jazz, new age jazz charts, right? A lot of mixed meter in there. Might not be written as a mixed meter, but might be felt as a mixed meter. So then you get into the debate of, is it a mixed meter or an asymmetrical meter, or is it a displaced accent? If it's regular enough, it could be called both, right? So we get into a lot of murky waters, kind of gray area and ambiguity that as long as you're able to define what the music is doing rhythmically with these terms, using them correctly, you're going to be just fine holding your own on any conversation with anyone concerning rhythmic attributes to music in any piece you study. So make sure you study up on this last section, the last kind of part of chapter 26, and really know the vocabulary terms for the test class. Okay? As always, get a hold of me with questions. Take care.